This is Chapter 1, Variations in Psychological Attributes of Class 12 Psychology, and the first part of this video was already covered in my last academic session. If you want to look at that, please click on the link above on the right side. There are several assessment methods in psychology, and the first one is psychological test. It is basically an objective and standardized measure of an individual's mental and behavioral characteristics. We know what is an objective test. We have covered that in the last session. Objective tests have been developed to measure all the dimensions of psychological attributes, mainly intelligence, aptitude, etc. These tests are widely used mostly by clinical psychologists for the purpose of clinical diagnosis, guidance, and personal selection, that is, selecting employees for a job, placement, and training. Besides these objective tests, psychologists also use various projective tests, especially for the assessment of personality. Let's look at the next one. Next one is interview. Interview involves basically seeking information from a person on a one-to-one basis. Mostly in counseling, we are doing interview for seeking the information of the client. Basically, counselor interacts with the client. For example, a salesperson is making a door-to-door survey regarding the usefulness of a product, or when an employer selects employees for his or her organization, or when a journalist is interviewing a famous personality in his or her show. So you've seen many kinds of interview. Similarly, we use interview in psychology as well. The next one is case study. Case study is basically an in-depth study of the individual in terms of his or her psychological attributes, psychological history in the context of his or her psychosocial and physical environment. We know what case studies are. Mainly used by clinical psychologists again. Case analysis of highly influential people are very good for motivating others because we get to know their life experiences. Case studies are based on data generated by different methods such as interview, observation, questionnaire, psychological test, etc. Next assessment method is observation. Observation involves basically employing systematic, organized and objective procedures. It's not basically just sitting somewhere around and observing things. We do it in a systematic way, because we are not disturbing the environment or the client in any way, or the person that we want to observe. Everything is happening in his or her natural setting. For example, the mother-child interactions can be easily studied through observation, and many other relationships like that. The major problems with observational methods are that the observer has very little control over the situation, or there can be a subjective interpretation, that is, whichever psychologist is making the observation can make his or her subjective interpretation. It may or may not be accurate. The next assessment method is self-report. It's basically the factual information, that is, what the client or the person provides about himself or herself. It can be his or her opinions, beliefs, etc. that he or she holds. Such information may be obtained by using an interview schedule or a questionnaire, a psychological test, or even their personal diary. Intelligence is a key construct employed to know how individuals differ from one another. It also provides an understanding of how people adapt their behavior according to the environment they live in. If you watch an intelligent person, you're likely to see in him or her attributes like mental alertness, ready wit, quickness in learning, etc. Here, mainly intelligence is defined in terms of perceiving, learning, understanding, and knowing your environment. Alfred Binet was one of the first psychologists who worked on intelligence. He defined intelligence as the ability to judge well. That is, we have to judge well a situation, understand well, and reason well. Whereas Wechsler, whose intelligence tests are most widely used, understood intelligence in terms of its functionality. that is its function, such as its value for adaptation to environment. Let's look at how Wechsler defined intelligence. It is the global and aggregate capacity of an individual to think rationally, act purposefully, and to deal effectively with his or her environment. That is, an intelligent person's think rationally before taking a decision or talking something negative or something inappropriate, act purposefully, and deal effectively with his or her environment, including the people around him or her. Other psychologists such as Gardner and Sternberg have suggested that an intelligent individual not only adapts to the environment but also actively tries to modify or shapes it. Theories of intelligence. Of intelligence can be classified mainly into two types. The first one is psychometric or structural approach. Basically, the psychometric approach considers intelligence as an aggregate of abilities, that is, a group of abilities. It expresses the individual's performance in terms of a single index of cognitive abilities. On the other hand, the second approach is the information processing approach. It describes the processes people use in intellectual reasoning and problem solving. That is, if you want to solve a particular problem, what are the cognitive processes that goes behind that problem solving, or behind you solving that particular problem. So those processes are the focus of information processing approach. The major focus of this approach is on how an intelligent person acts, acts, rather than focusing on structure of intelligence or its underlying dimensions. Information processing approach mainly emphasizes studying cognitive functions, like I mentioned, underlying intelligent behavior.